Hello and welcome back. We're going to continue with our lectures on anatomy and physiology by looking at nutrition and digestion in this lecture. And this is chapter 23 of your textbook. Your digestive tract is a long tube that runs from your mouth to your anus. And because both of your mouth and anus are open to the environment and connected by this tube, your digestive tract is often considered to be external to the rest of your body. So many consider the digestive tract to be an extension of the environment that just so happens to run through your body. And so for the next couple of slides, we're going to talk about the four main stages of the digestive system and the organs that are involved and what occurs at each of these stages as food goes from your mouth through your digestive tract and waste gets excreted from your anus. So the first stage in digestion is ingestion, and this is the intake of food via the mouth. In addition to the mouth, your teeth, tongue, and esophagus are also involved in this process. So first we use our teeth to help break down large food particles into smaller, more manageable pieces. And so we have a couple different types of teeth that are involved. We have our incisors, which are these first four teeth, and then we have our canines. And these six teeth together are responsible for helping with biting and tearing food. And then all the teeth that are behind the canine teeth are your molars and premolars. And these are responsible for grinding and crushing food into increasingly smaller and smaller pieces. So this is how most mammals and reptiles, non-avian reptiles, and fish go about helping to break their food down. Birds, however, do not have this advantage. Birds do not have teeth. That would be really creepy. Instead, birds have to use an organ called the gizzard to help break their food down into smaller pieces. So they use their beak to obtain their food and they swallow it whole. And then once they swallow it, it travels down their esophagus to a structure called the crop. And in the crop, the food basically sits there and waits until it can be moved into the gizzard, which is here. And the gizzard has small pieces of soil and rocks contained within it that help to grind the food that's been swallowed whole into smaller and smaller pieces. So the gizzard in birds functions similar to the teeth in us to help break down food into smaller pieces before it continues throughout the digestive tract. So in addition to teeth being involved in the process of ingestion, we also have our salivary glands. And you can see those in this picture here. This is a salivary gland, and then you see them on the other side of this picture as well. And the salivary glands are responsible for secreting mucus, and this mucus helps to lubricate the process of eating. So when you're chewing the food, if there wasn't salivary glands putting that mucus out there, it would be a very tough, dry process, and it'd be very difficult for you to swallow. If you've ever had dry crackers with no water, you know what this is like. Trying to swallow something that's kind of hard and dry is complicated. So the salivary glands help to put out that mucus to lubricate this process. In addition, the salivary glands excrete these enzymes called amylases. And amylases begin the digestion process for complex starches. So it starts breaking those starches down. So digestion, to some extent, starts in the mouth with the starches. Nothing else is broken down in the mouth at this point. Then we also have the tongue. So as you're chewing your food, the tongue is constantly moving around, manipulating the food, making sure it gets broken down into small enough pieces. And then once you're ready, your tongue will push the food to the back of your throat, and it kind of forms like a ball of masticated mess. So the food will move to the back of the throat, and it'll travel from the throat to your esophagus. And in your esophagus, you have this flap of flesh here called the epiglottis. And the epiglottis is responsible for basically it's like the gatekeeper between your esophagus and your trachea. So when you're breathing, it's open and your esophagus is closed. But when you're eating, you don't want food to get in your trachea. So the epiglottis will go down and it will cover the trachea to prevent food from going into your lungs. Now, if your epiglottis becomes blocked for some reason, this is what happens when you start to choke. This can be problematic, right? So you want to make sure it's closed, but you want to make sure it can reopen, right? It doesn't get jammed or anything gets stuck in your throat because you won't be able to breathe. And so then once the food is in your esophagus, The smooth muscle that is lining your esophagus will basically move in a peristaltic manner, which is like basically it'll contract here and then contract down, contract down, contract down, and this contraction helps to push the food down your esophagus. This is involuntary, it's smooth muscle movement, and this is also the reason why you can do a headstand and swallow water, and the water will still go to your stomach. It won't come out of your mouth because of this movement constantly pushing the food further and further down. The next major stage in the digestive system is digestion. And this is the breakdown of food into its fundamental chemical parts. And it begins when the food gets to the stomach. But before we get there, the food has to get to the very end of the esophagus where it meets this gatekeeper here called a sphincter. And we have several sphincters throughout our body, but this sphincter is blocking the passageway between the esophagus and the stomach. This sphincter also helps to prevent regurgitation. So this is also why you can do a headstand and not all of your stomach acid comes rushing out of your body, right? It closes that passage until it needs to open. So once food gets to the sphincter, it'll open up, deposit food into the stomach, and then it'll close again. So once food is in the stomach, it will be physically and chemically broken down into something called chyme. And so how this process works is the stomach lining will produce two types of, or a couple different types of elements. One, it will produce a very strong acid called hydrochloric acid, and hydrochloric acid starts breaking down the food into progressively smaller and smaller pieces. It's extremely acidic, and it also starts to denature proteins into, so proteins normally are kind of like very, very compact three-dimensional structures. But when they're in this acidic environment, those three-dimensional structures will break down into kind of linear chains of amino acids. And the acidic environment helps to facilitate this process. This process is necessary in order for your body to use those proteins. In addition to hydrochloric acid, your stomach lining will also start to produce something called pepsinogen. And pepsinogen is the precursor to pepsin. So pepsinogen will be converted to pepsin, and pepsin is the enzyme that's responsible for helping to also break down proteins. So the major thing that's being broken down in this portion of the digestive tract is proteins, and then also carbohydrates are being broken down in this heavily acidic environment. And then as your food is moving around, it's churning, it's physically helping to break up those pieces as well. So this is why sometimes you can hear your stomach making a lot of very weird noises. It's because those smooth muscles are moving around, moving the food, breaking it into smaller pieces. And so eventually all the food will no longer be recognizable. It'll turn into this milky white liquid called chyme. And chyme is an acidic mixture of partially digested food that then gets sent to the small intestine. And so it's primarily composed of carbs and proteins that have been mostly digested, if not fully digested, and then the lipids and fibers that have not been digested at all. And lipids and fiber, well, lipids get digested, begin digestion in the next portion in the small intestine, whereas fiber will not be digested, it'll just continue throughout the rest of your body. So the chyme eventually passes from the stomach into the small intestine, but in order to do that, it must also pass through another sphincter, which is located in this area. And that sphincter will open and close periodically, and it will deposit small amounts of chyme from the stomach into the small intestine. And so this process will continue until all the food in your stomach has been moved, all the chyme in your stomach has been moved from the stomach into the small intestine. Now that the chyme has reached the small intestine, we'll really start to see a lot of digestion occur. And so that chyme will be moved from the entrance of the small intestine down the small intestine slowly over time due to the peristaltic contractions of the smooth muscle that lines the small intestine. It's like we talked about with the esophagus, how there'll be a contraction, relax, contraction, relax, contraction, relax, to push that food down your esophagus. The same thing happens in your small intestine. You have that contraction, relax, that will push those various spurts of chyme sequentially down the small intestine. Now your small intestine is very, very large. very long, so this will take a long time, but it's very, very important that food goes through this process so it can accurately be broken down and also absorbed. So, in the small intestine, there are a couple different factors that help with breaking down food into its macromolecular parts. One, we have the pancreatic juices. And so we have the pancreas here that produces various chemicals and enzymes that it will secrete into the small intestine that will join with the chyme. And these chemicals are responsible for, one, neutralizing the pH of the chyme because it came from the stomach where it was mixed with hydrochloric acid, which is very, very acidic. You don't want hydrochloric acid just anywhere in your body. It can degrade your tissues. So the pancreatic juices help to neutralize that pH so that it's no longer acidic, but also break down various lipids, carbs, and fats that have not been digested yet that's in the chyme. We also have bile that is originated from the liver that helps with the breaking down of lipids. So bile is also what causes your feces to be brown. So the bile will come from the liver and it'll go to something called the gallbladder, which is here. And then from the gallbladder, it will travel through ducts to the small intestine. And in the small intestine, the bile helps to break down large lipid globules into smaller, more manageable pieces that the pancreatic juices can actually break down. So the lipids, they want to stick together because they're hydrophobic. So when the lipids first get into the small intestine, they might be these large rafts, which is very hard to break down, but the bile helps to break those large rafts into smaller, more manageable droplets so that the pancreatic juices can break them down even further into their actual molecular parts. And then finally, we also have enzymes that are actively being secreted from the lining of the small intestine that help with breaking down the various proteins, carbs, and lipids that are present in the chyme. And so as this process is going along, most of the fatty acids, amino acids, simple sugars, vitamins, minerals that are in the chyme that have now all been digested and broken down to their smallest parts will start to be absorbed into the small intestine. And then after that, everything moves on to the large intestine. I just mentioned the next major stage in the digestive system, which is absorption. And absorption is the uptake of molecules from the digestive tract into the bloodstream, which are then transported to various other locations and tissues around the body that need those molecules. And the organ that's primarily responsible for absorption is the small intestine. And the small intestine is actually designed to optimize nutrient absorption. And the key here is surface area. So before we kind of go into what those structures are, I want to make sure we're all on the same page. So to give you guys an example of why surface area is important, let's imagine we had two puddles of water. We got two spills on your counter at home. And they're both the same size. And then you have two options. You have the option of using a paper towel that's this size or paper towel that's this size. Vast majority of us will pick the larger paper towel, and that's because we know that it's going to be able to absorb that entire puddle and probably even some more. And that's because that larger paper towel has a larger surface area so it can absorb more water. And that's essentially the same concept that your small intestine has used. It has tried to have as much surface area as possible so it can absorb as much nutrients as possible. Another thing to keep in mind is you can optimize surface area by making things as compact as possible. We can see this in our DNA. Our DNA is extremely long, but we twist it and wind it and curl it up on various proteins and on itself to make it more compact. And the similar type of concept happens in your small intestine. Your small intestine has found ways to optimize the amount of surface area it can get through using invaginations and protrusions. And so we'll look at some of those now. So the small intestine is not a smooth tube that runs through your body. Instead, there are many invaginations in the small intestine. You can see them here in this cartoon, how it's very bumpy. And these invaginations allow for you to have more surface area for how much space you take up. If you were to pull the small intestine and make it very, very long so it was nice and smooth, it would be incredibly long, right? So in order to put it all in your body but have as much surface area as possible, it's almost like an accordion. You've compacted it so that it can all fit, but you still have that same high amount of surface area. In addition to having these invaginations, the cells that line your small intestines also have these protrusions called villi, and they're seen in this picture. And this is actually a picture of what they look like as well. And there are these extensions off the the top of the intestinal cells that points towards the lumen, or this area here, the entrance of the small intestine. And so those finger-like projections are interacting with the chyme, which helps to also optimize surface area. If these cells were flat across the top, they would not have nearly as much surface area as they do having these villi. And then to add to that, the villi also have small villi on them called microvilli, which they're showing you in this picture. And these microvilli help to also further increase the surface area. So there are plenty of opportunities for nutrients that are present in the chyme to interact with the cells that line the small intestine so they can be absorbed. And so what happens is, chyme travels down the small intestine, and then once the macromolecules have been broken down into their substituents, those nutrients then interact directly with the cell. And once they interact with the cell will bring them in. And from the intestinal cells, it will travel through the cell and diffuse out of the cell into the interstitial fluid. And then from the interstitial fluid, they will then be brought into the the circulatory system. And once they're in the bloodstream, they'll then be traveled to other places of the body that need that nutrient. So the chyme is continually being moved down the small intestine, and the food is being digested and nutrients are being absorbed. And then eventually you reach the end of the small intestine and the chyme is pushed into the large intestine. And the large intestine is where we begin the last stage of the digestive system, which is the excretion phase. And during excretion, this is our last chance to absorb any nutrients that are remaining in the chyme, as well as get rid of any waste products that we ultimately don't need. And so this process occurs, like I mentioned, in the large intestine, and the chyme is moved through the large intestine using the same peristaltic smooth muscle contractions as we saw in the small intestine and we saw in the esophagus. And as the chyme is being moved through, it can be a difficult process. So it helps if you have fiber in your diet. And this is because fiber helps to attract water from the surrounding cells into the large intestine, and it helps to keep the chyme moist as it's traveling through the digestive system. If you don't have fiber in your diet, you might find yourself to be more constipated or have a harder time passing your fecal matter because it's dry. And when it's dry, it doesn't travel as well through the digestive system and it will be harder to pass. Also, fiber is good to have in your diet because it helps with managing your cholesterol. So fiber is known to bind to bile. And we talked about bile is responsible for helping to break up those large lipid droplets into smaller, more manageable droplets so that the pancreatic juices can digest them so we can absorb those lipids. Well, if the fiber binds to the bile, then the lipid globules, those big rafts, can't be broken up, and then your body doesn't absorb nearly as much lipids than if you didn't have fiber in your diet. So having fiber is helpful in a couple different ways, managing your cholesterol, but also helps to allow everything to keep moving through your digestive system as smoothly as possible. And so as your chyme is moving through the large intestine, we're primarily absorbing water, salts, and vitamins at this point, as well as any additional nutrients that didn't get absorbed in the small intestine. And so how this process works is as the chyme travels down the large intestine, salts are being actively removed from the chyme and absorbed by the cells that line the large intestine. And when this happens, as we've seen several times already, when you're actively moving salts, water will passively follow. So the active uptake of salts results in the passive reabsorption of water. And so as the chyme travels further and further down your digestive system, down your large intestine, we're extracting more and more and more water until we get to the end. And generally, if you have a not so great fiber diet, this is when you might have a more compact stool. But if you have a high fiber diet, your stool may be a little bit looser and easier to pass. So as the chyme is moving through the large intestine, if we absorb too much water, and this can occur if you have too few fiber, if your body is just really, really good at absorbing a lot of waters because it absorbed a lot of salt, you can end up with constipation. On the opposite end, if there are a lot of salts present in your chyme, then a lot of water will remain in the feces and you can end up with diarrhea. So you want to make sure you have a good even balance of water absorption and water retention in the feces so that you don't get constipated or have diarrhea. So eventually we get to the end of the end of the large intestine, and only thing that's left is waste that's going to be excreted from the body. So the waste is collected in the rectum, and then once you feel like you gotta go, then you defecate. The waste leaves the anus and is now in the environment, and the whole process continues for the remainder of your life as long as you're eating. And so this whole process is also facilitated by some very small but very important helpers, which are the bacteria that line our large intestine. And so we're going to talk about those for a minute in the next slide. Your microbiome are the microbes that live in and on your body that play a major role in the proper functioning of your body as well as keeping you healthy. And so in this lecture, because we're talking about the digestive system, we'll primarily focus on the microbiome of your colon. And so there are so many bacterial cells that live in your colon that when you defecate, your feces is actually 50% just dead bacteria. That's crazy, right? Like, imagine if 50% of your feces is the dead bacteria. Imagine how many live bacteria are living in your colon. These bacteria are the good guys. We don't want to get rid of them. So we want to have these guys around. They allow us to properly function. And so we've actually calculated that there are more bacterial cells that make up you than you cells. So there are more bacteria in and on you than the amount of cells that actually make up your body. And you obtain these cells at birth. So you obtain them if your mother gave birth to you the normal way through her vaginal canal, then you get covered in some fecal matter and the bacteria from her vagina, and that helps to inoculate your body with some of the microbes that you need. You can additionally get them as you are breastfeeding from the mom, as well as once you start to eat solid foods or put things in your mouth as a child, you get inoculated with the microbes that will later make up your colon microbiome. And the vast majority of the bacteria that live in your colon are either harmless to you or they're completely beneficial to you. So much so that people try and spend a lot of money to get those beneficial bacteria in their bodies. And they're beneficial in a couple of ways. One, a lot of them can produce the vitamins that we need that we cannot produce ourselves. One example being like vitamin K. We don't produce them ourselves, we have to get them from our diet, but another way we can get them is through these bacteria that just live within us. As they're eating any nutrients that are left in your chyme, they are excreting vitamin K that you can use in your body. Also, they can help to protect you from pathogens. So the way this works is if your colon, the lining of your colon, is almost basically completely covered with these bacteria, then they've taken up all the real estate. So if a harmful bacteria gets somehow into your colon, they have nowhere to attach to because every piece of surface area that they can attach to has already have a bacteria residing in that space. So this helps to protect you from pathogens, as well as some of these bacteria actively fight other bacteria, and some of those are pathogens to us. So they help to keep us healthy and safe and keep us from getting infected by some of the nasty bacteria that none of us want. And they also help to slow down the movement of chyme through your system. You don't want the chyme to move through too fast because then you can end up with diarrhea or various other issues with malabsorption. So the bacteria help to slow this process down so that you are able to properly digest and absorb your food, but also you don't end up having like dysentery type levels of diarrhea. And then when you take antibiotics, if you've ever taken antibiotics that are orally taken, you might have been told to also eat like yogurt or sauerkraut or some sort of probiotic type drink afterwards. And this is because when you take an antibiotic, it tends to wipe out both the good and bad bacteria in your body. And so, in order to help to reestablish the microbiota in your colon, oftentimes people will say eat some yogurt because it has a lot of probiotic bacteria, or drink kefir or kombucha or different things like that that are fermented to help reestablish those beneficial bacteria. Because if you don't, then it leaves a lot of space for harmful bacteria to take up residence in your body and cause infection. So just something to always keep in mind. Not all bacteria are the bad guys. Some animals are not fortunate enough to have a digestive system that's that simple. Some of them have to go through more complex processes to extract the nutrients they need from their food. One good example of this are ruminant animals. And these are animals that are oftentimes grazers, like cows, goats, and sheep that eat grass as their primary source of food. And one great thing about grass is it's everywhere. Like grass and leaves are everywhere. And they also don't run away, so they're pretty easy prey. But one drawback to them is they have cellulose. And cellulose is, for the most part, indigestible for animals. And this includes for ruminants for the most part. And so they had to figure out inventive ways to digest the cellulose so that they can extract as much nutrients as they can from their diet. So how ruminants do this is they first chew their food, like we talked about before, and they swallow it. But then once they swallow it, the food goes to a very interesting stomach. So our stomach has one chamber, but in ruminant animals, their stomachs often have several chambers, up to 4 chambers. And so the food will travel down their esophagus to their first chamber of their stomach. And in that first part of their stomach, they have enzymes and cellulose digesting bacteria that basically are just sitting in there waiting for this grass to come in. So once that chewed up grass gets into that first part of the stomach, those bacteria and enzymes start to break down the cellulose. And then after some time has passed and some of that cellulose is broken down, the animal will regurgitate the food from that first part of their stomach back out of their esophagus into their mouth and further chew that food. And so this is called chewing the cud. If you've ever heard of that, that's what's happening. So they'll further chew it to help break down even further that cellulose containing material, and then they'll re-swallow it back into their digestive system to that first chamber of the stomach. And in that first chamber, those bacteria and enzymes will further break down more of that cellulose before moving the material to the other chambers of the stomach. And then from there, the whole process is the same as we talked about before. So from the other 3 chambers of the stomach, the food will continue to be broken down and then move to small intestines. And small intestines, nutrients will be absorbed and further digestion occurs. And then it goes to the large intestine, and then any waste is excreted from the body. There are also some other mechanisms that animals can use out there. Some insects can actually produce the cellulose digesting enzymes themselves. They don't need to have a partnership with any bacteria. Some have these really large cecums that are off of their large intestines where they harbor cellulose digesting bacteria. And so they will divert that, after it's gone through the small intestine, they will divert the chyme into the cecum for an extended period of time to allow the cellulose digesting bacteria to break down that cellulose before returning the chyme to the large intestine. And so you can see we also have a cecum in humans, but it's far smaller. And that's because we don't digest cellulose. If we did, we might have a cecum that looks more like this, and koalas, which eat eucalyptus leaves, which is much, much longer and responsible for breaking down that cellulose. There are a couple of other animals besides koalas that have an extended cecum. We have like rabbits and horses and other rodents that also have an extended cecum to help break down cellulose. And then some animals engage in coprophagy, which is the consumption of feces. And so what they'll do is they will defecate and then they will eat those feces because it's better for them to give it another pass through their digestive system to absorb as much nutrients as possible. So once that food travels back through their digestive system, hopefully any undigested cellulose will be digested that second time around. And there are a lot of animals that engage in this practice as well. Rodents, rabbits, pigs, cats, elephants, chimps, and gorillas all engage in coprophagy. So now that we've talked about the digestive tract and the various elements of the digestive system, let's spend some time talking about nutrients. Nutrients is a term you probably already heard me say. When we're talking about absorption, I mentioned nutrients, and I said there are molecules that we're absorbing. And so we're going to just talk about what those molecules are and why they're important. And so we get the nutrients we need from food. And these nutrients are important because they allow for growth as well as provide our bodies with the fuel we need to survive. There are a couple of different ways that you can get the nutrients you need. There's herbivory, carnivory, and omnivory, which is herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. But then you also have parasitism. So they're parasites that generally, for the most part, parasites don't kill their host. They just feed off of their host until they move into another host. And the types of nutrients that we need are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, vitamins, minerals, and the most important one, which is water. And water is the most essential nutrient because it's involved in various life processes that we really couldn't even survive without water because it's just that essential, which I'm pretty sure everyone in this class already knows. Every day, it's recommended that you consume between 2 and 3 liters of water. And this is because we lose a lot of water in our body due to urination, defecation, respiration, and perspiration. So it's good to replenish that water through drinking. But there are other ways you can get water in your diet as well, through food. So there are a lot of foods that are very apparent because they're juicy, like fruits and vegetables that have a high water content. But there are also other foods out there that have water in them, whether you realize it or not, like meats and things like that. And then we have water that we get from chemical reactions. So cellular respiration, one of the byproducts is the production of water molecules. And so this is another way that we can get the water we need. It's important to make sure that you remain hydrated. If you feel thirsty, you're already dehydrated. So you want to make sure you drink as much water as you need. But you don't want to drink too much water because you can get water toxicity. And this is because the amount of salts in your body is way too low. And if that happens, that can cause serious issues like dizziness, disorientation, confusion, and even death if it goes on too long. So you want to make sure you have just the right amount of water, a good balance. So I mentioned water plays a lot of major roles in the body. I've listed some of them here. Water plays a major role in transport of nutrients and waste in the body. We talked about in the plasma, one of the main components of blood plasma is water. And so, of course, it's involved with transport of nutrients throughout the body and waste. As well, we just talked about water plays a major role in the movement of waste through your digestive tract. If you do not have enough water in your diet and you don't have enough fiber in your diet, it can make excretion of that waste very challenging. Water also takes part in a lot of chemical reactions in your body, and it serves as a solvent for various minerals and amino acids and sugars that are circulating through your body. Water also lubricates your joints. So without enough water, especially in older people, your joints will start to rub against each other a lot more, which can cause pain. So you want to make sure that you're consuming enough water. Even if you're young, this can become a problem. It also helps to lubricate your eyes, right? If you don't have enough water in your body, you might experience dry eye. And it also helps you to regulate your body temperature through perspiration. So these are just a few functions of water. Water plays a huge major role in every aspect of your body. Calories is a term that I'm sure everyone in this class is familiar with. We hear this term all the time, but many people don't actually quite understand what a calorie is. A calorie is a unit of measurement. It's a measurement of how much energy is required to increase the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. And when we use the term calorie in a scientific sense, it's very different from the use of the word in an everyday sense. So when we're looking at food calories, so you see like a label like this that says that your snack or whatever has a certain amount of calories, in this case 50 calories. That's 50 food calories. But 50 food calories is actually 50 kilocalories, which is equivalent to 50,000 calories. So whenever you see those labels on the back of your food, multiply whatever number you see by 1,000. That's how many actual calories you're consuming. Now, for most people, unless you're going into science or reading something scientific, this distinction doesn't really quite matter. For the most part, in everyday life, we measure things in kilocalories or calories with a capital C. But it is important to know that 50 calories from food is not the same as 50 actual calories, right? 50 actual calories is much, much lower. It's 1,000 times lower than 50 food calories. And the caloric expenditure of each person varies, and for each animal it varies, and it's based on the basal metabolic rate of that animal. And the basal metabolic rate, or BMR, is the amount of energy required for you to survive when you have an empty digestive tract and you're in a optimum temperature environment doing absolutely nothing. So if you woke up, sat down and watched Netflix in a perfectly temperature controlled room, how much energy is required to keep you alive in that moment is your BMR. And every animal's BMR is different. So some animals, especially like smaller animals and like rodents and things like that, whose heartbeat is very, very fast, they have a higher BMR than something like a human does because they require a lot more energy at rest to keep them alive than we do. So the BMR is not consistent between all animal species, and it's also not consistent between person to person. To calculate your BMR, you would take your weight. To calculate the amount of calories you need to consume each day, you should calculate your weight times your BMR times the number of hours in the day. And so when you do this calculation, that'll give you the amount of calories you need every day at rest. Now, the amount of calories you need will fluctuate based on your activity. So for an average female in the United States that's 120 pounds, they, at rest, need approximately 14,000 kilocalories to survive. So if that woman is just at rest all day, then that's sufficient. But let's say that woman is an avid cyclist. She needs more calories in her day in order to keep her body going. So your BMR is just the absolute base. Things can go up from there. So the more active you are, the more calories you need per day. And the same thing goes for a male. So the average male at rest needs 17,000 kilocalories per day. But if they're 160 pounds, but if that male gets a lot more physical activity, he goes out running or goes to the gym often, then he will require more calories in his day in order to keep going efficiently. When we're calculating calories, there are 3 out of the 6 essential nutrients that are involved in that calculation, and those include carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. So we'll begin with proteins. Proteins are composed of long strings of amino acids, and there are 20 amino acids to pick from. Humans, we need all 20 of these amino acids in order to function properly, and as do most animals. And there are a couple different sources where we can get those amino acids that we need. One, we can get them from our bodies. So our bodies are able to produce a certain number of amino acids itself, and the types of amino acids and the amounts of each amino acids that are produced by the body vary per animal species. So some species make more of the amino acids that they need, some make less, and then some may make these 6 and others will make these 6. It just varies between species. And the amino acids that your body can make itself are called non-essential amino acids. Then we have the essential amino acids, and these are the amino acids that your body cannot make, and you must acquire them through consumption of food. And so this can be either through the consumption of plants or animals, but depending on what you're eating, the proteins that you're going to consume will vary. So each animal has, and each plant has a different protein composition. And because of this, that means the amino acid composition as well is different. And so we have two different types of proteins you can get from your diet. You can have complete proteins, which are proteins that include all of the essential amino acids. These are always great because you eat that type of food, you get those proteins, break them down, you get all the amino acids you need. And we have incomplete proteins. And these are foods or proteins that contain some of the essential amino acids, but not all of them. And when you have a diet that is heavy in incomplete protein, you have to make sure that you have a very diverse diet so that you're getting all of those essential amino acids that you need each day, even though you might not get them all from one particular type of food. If you have multiple different types of foods from different sources, you're sure to get all of the essential amino acids that you need. And how this works is proteins get into our bodies when we eat food, but we don't automatically just take those proteins out of our intestines and use them ourselves. Instead, we take those proteins, break them down into their amino acid parts, and then we recycle those amino acids to be used to make proteins that we need in our bodies. And any excess proteins you consume have two different fates. They can be broken down and used as energy, or they can be converted into fats to be stored in the body. If we break down a 1 gram of amino acids, we can get approximately 4 kilocalories worth of energy, which is not great. It's not bad, but it's not great. It's okay. And we'll see that it can be a little bit better when we talk about lipids. But that's a decent amount of energy. And this can be beneficial to the body because we need that energy, but it can also be a little bit of a drawback. And that's because when we break down this molecule, we lose this nitrogen molecule here. And readily bioavailable nitrogen is actually relatively rare in nature. And so losing that nitrogen leaves us with an inability to make new protein because that nitrogen will be excreted in urine as urea. So it's beneficial because we get energy. Drawback, we lose that valuable nitrogen that we need to make proteins. And the same kind of drawbacks happen when we convert amino acids into lipids. So it's a very energetically expensive process to convert this amino acid, which is structurally very different from a lipid, into a lipid. But in addition to all of that, we also lose that nitrogen. So we can't make any more proteins from this amino acid because that nitrogen is lost as waste. So there are definitely pros and cons to what happens to excess proteins in our bodies. When it comes to energy acquisition, carbohydrates are clearly the preferred molecule. When our bodies get a choice between carbohydrates, fats, or proteins to use for energy, it immediately picks the carbohydrates first. And from 1 gram of carbohydrates, we can get approximately 4 kilocalories worth of energy, which is pretty good. It's the same amount that we would get if we broke down a gram of amino acids. So it's okay. And we can get this energy through the breaking of molecular bonds that occur between the atoms in the carbohydrate structure. There are a couple of sources of carbohydrates from your diet. This include fruits, vegetables, and grains, but carnivores can also get carbohydrates in their diet as well. Many strict carnivores like wolves and lions and things like that will often eat the intestines of their prey, and when they do that, the intestines, if they're where herbivorous prey, have plant material in them, so when they eat the intestines, they also get that plant material, so they get some of that fiber and carbohydrates in their diet. There are 3 types of carbohydrates. We have monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. Monosaccharides are often referred to as simple sugars, and there are between 3 and 7 carbons in their ring structure, and this is the smallest unit of a carbohydrate. So when we have these in our body, we send them straight into glycolysis, which is a topic you should have discussed in 1103. And some examples of monosaccharides are glucose and fructose. And then we also have disaccharides. And disaccharides is the combination of 2 simple sugars that are connected by a bond. So you can see that here we have 1 sugar and we have 2 sugars, and they're connected by this bond here, right? This bond that I'm highlighting in red. And in order for us to use disaccharides for energy, we first break that bond between the monosaccharides. So we break that bond I've highlighted in red, and this will give us two monosaccharides that then are sent to glycolysis to get energy. And some examples of this would be sucrose. Then we have polysaccharides, and there are two types of polysaccharides. We have digestible polysaccharides and indigestible polysaccharides. One example of a digestible polysaccharide is starch, and this picture is showing you part of the structure of starch. Starch is composed of a whole bunch of glucose monosaccharides that have been linked together. So you can see those linkages here. There's bonds all in those areas. And so to break down these polysaccharides, we first break all of those bonds between the various monosaccharides, and then we take the resulting monosaccharides and put them through glycolysis to get the energy we need. Another example of a digestible polysaccharide is glycogen, which is our long-term or more long-term storage of carbohydrates. And then we have fiber, and fiber is our indigestible polysaccharide. And they look structurally very similar to our digestible polysaccharides, except for one key difference. And that difference is this bond here. The bonds that connect the monosaccharides in fiber are called the glycosidic linkages, this beta-1,4 glycosidic linkage. And our bodies, the enzymes in our bodies, are unable to break that bond. It looks like it's a very, very small, minute change, but it's enough to make a world of a difference. So our bodies can't break this down, so these polysaccharides will just travel through the digestive tract whole and be excreted from the body. An example being cellulose, which is what part of this picture is showing you is part of cellulose. And unless you are a ruminant or one of those types of animals we talked about before, you would not be able to break this down unless you have beneficial bacteria or you produce enzymes that can break that glycosidic linkage. And any excess carbohydrates are stored as glycogen in our livers and muscles. So we convert these simple sugars or even complex sugars into glycogen specifically, and then we'll store glycogen. And then we can also convert these carbohydrates into fats as well for more long-term storage. And at any given time, your body is storing approximately 1 day's worth of energy as glycogen, just in case you don't get enough calories that day or you're not eating enough or something goes wrong. Your body has enough energy to get you through at least 1 day feeling relatively normal until you can get access to food like you need. When it comes to energy, lipids are the clear masters. Lipids are very energy rich, but they're also really good for long-term energy storage. When you break down 1 gram of lipids, you can get up to 9 kilocalories worth of energy. This is over twice the amount that you would get from the breakdown of monosaccharides or from a breakdown of amino acids. So you get a lot more bang for your buck. Also, lipids are really good for long-term energy storage. At any given point in time, your body is holding on to about 4 to 5 weeks worth of energy in the form of lipids. And this is all based on the fact that lipids are hydrophobic. So lipids are hydrophobic. That means they don't interact well with water. So when we store lipids, we don't also end up storing a lot of water. This is not the case for carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are hydrophilic. So when we store carbohydrates, we also store a lot more water. And so if we stored more carbohydrates, we would end up with more water retention. And so this is why we only store about 1 day's worth of carbohydrates in our body, but we can store several weeks worth of lipids in our body. It's a lot better when it comes to water retention for us. There are a couple different sources of lipids that you can get in your diet. This includes butters, oils, fatty meats, and legumes. And before we move on, I wanted to point out this picture here. This is a picture of adipose tissue. And in this picture, there are several different cells. They're a little bit hard to see, so I'm going to point some of them out. I'm going to outline them. So this is a cell here, and then like this is a cell here. And within these cells, you can see these red droplets, right, and these red bubbles. And these red droplets are lipids. They've been stained for the purposes of this picture. But these lipids are contained within those adipose tissue until they're needed. So let's say you're fasting for a long period of time, or you're doing a very long marathon run, or you get stranded somewhere and you don't have access to food. Your body will start to remove the lipids from these cells and metabolize them for energy. So this is what those adipose tissue cells look like. Lipids are composed of fatty acids, and there are two types of fatty acids that we need. We have our non-essential fatty acids, which are those that our body can produce, like cholesterol, and then we have our essential fatty acids, which we must get from our diet. And fatty acids are composed of long chains of carbon, which is actually the key to why they're so energy rich. So if you look at this picture of this fatty acid, for each of these carbon-carbon bonds, when you break them, there's a potential to release more and more energy. And when you look at the structure of a fatty acid and you compare it to the structure of an amino acid or the structure of a monosaccharide, you can see that there are a lot more bonds in fatty acids. So there's a lot more potential to get energy from the breakdown of these molecules than from the breakdown of amino acids or monosaccharides. So this is why you get a lot more energy from them. Lipids are extremely important. Fatty acids are extremely important in your diet. They play a role in your body in hormone production, growth, thermoregulation, and development. So you want to make sure that you're actually getting fatty acids in your diet. I know many people try to cut them out completely, but this is a bad idea. If you do not get the essential and non-essential lipids in your body, then you will be in serious trouble. So there are two types of fatty acids. We have our saturated and unsaturated fatty acids. Saturated fatty acids are like what you see in this picture here, and they're called saturated because each of the carbons that are in that fatty acid chain are bound to 2 hydrogen molecules, which is the maximum amount that they can be bonded to. So they're considered to be saturated. And these fatty acids are linear, so they can be closely packed together. And then we have our unsaturated fatty acids, which look something like this. And their key difference is this bond right here. In an unsaturated fatty acid, there are carbon-carbon double bonds, at least one, that there can be multiples along the chain. And this causes the fatty acid, instead of being linear, to have a kink in it. And this makes a world of a difference. It doesn't seem like a big difference, but it's a major difference in how the oils function in the body and how they perform at room temperature. So when we're looking at a saturated fatty acid, because they're linear, they can be closely packed together. So at room temperature, these lipids are solid. An example would be butter. But when we have our unsaturated fatty acids, they have those kinks in them. And this inhibits them from being compacted nearly as densely. So these lipids are liquid at room temperature, like oil, like vegetable oil, olive oil, canola oil, things like that. And these unsaturated fatty acids are a lot better for you than saturated fatty acids. This is because your body is more likely to use the unsaturated fatty acids for energy rather than for fat stores. Your body is really good at taking saturated fatty acid and incorporating it into your body as long-term fat storage. So more unsaturated fatty acids, less saturated fatty acids. There's another type of unsaturated fatty acid that you really don't want to have in your diet, and those are trans fats. So the picture that I've shown you up here is the cis fatty acid. And the key difference between the cis and trans is the location of the hydrogens. So in the cis fatty acid, the hydrogens are on the same side of the molecule. But in a trans fatty acid, they're on opposite sides. And it seems like a very subtle thing, but it makes a world of difference. Cis fatty acids are good for you. They're good to have in your diet, whereas trans fatty acids are pretty much banned in the United States and various countries around the world. And that's because they've been associated with increased risk of coronary heart disease. So you want to make sure that there are no trans fats in your diet. If you're eating processed food in the United States, more than likely you will not see trans fats in that food anymore. But this was really common several decades ago. Trans fats were really common in the American diet, and people were having lots of cardiovascular issues. So definitely the takeaway message: more unsaturated fatty acids, less saturated fatty acids, and no trans fatty acids. So as I mentioned before, any excess calories that we get from carbs, proteins, or fats are converted into fat stores in our body. And generally, your body is trying to do the most efficient thing that it can. So fats are more readily converted into fat stores than carbohydrates and proteins, but they're all converted. And this is because carbohydrates and proteins have to go through several different steps that are energetically expensive to convert those molecules into fats. And so you can see an example here. They're walking you through how you take a simple sugar and you break that down through the use of energy, and then you convert that sugar into a lipid, which will ultimately cause you have to bring energy into the system to store it as a lipid. Whereas if you stored lipids, they're already in the form of lipids. You can just store them in the body with minimal use of energy to convert them in any way. And so in our bodies, we have obviously lots of fat. 1 pound of fat is equal to approximately 3,600 kilocalories of energy, which is a lot of energy. This is why your fat stores can generally keep you going for several weeks before you have to seriously worry about death. Not saying you won't have any adverse health issues if your fat stores get too low, but they will be able to keep you going for a longer period of time than if you relied on carbohydrate stores alone. So lipids, as I mentioned, are very, very important to have in your diet. They play major roles in various functions of your body. However, you do not want to have excessive lipid storage in your body because this can lead to obesity. And there are a variety of issues, health issues that come with obesity. And we'll talk about those in a couple more slides. But for now, we'll just say that obesity can occur because you increase the number of fat cells, so adipose tissue, and you also increase the size of those adipose tissue cells. For the most part, the increase in the number of adipose cells occurs in adolescence. So when you're in your early teens, mid-teens years, if you experience obesity as a child, instead of increasing the size of those adipose tissues, for the most part, you're increasing the number of adipose tissue cells. And that number of cells does not decrease as you get older. And so this is why it's really important to make sure that children are of a healthy weight, because those adipose tissue cells will carry with them through their childhood into adulthood. And then for the most part, when adults gain more fat, it's because of the adipose tissue cells that they have are expanding in size. So if you had a lot more adipose tissue cells gained as an adolescent, when you get as an adult, you have more opportunity for those cells to grow larger and larger. As an adult, you can increase in the number of adipose tissue cells, but for the most part, you're just getting bigger and bigger and bigger cells. And so you want to make sure that you're keeping your weight pretty healthy. One way to do this is to limit the amount of lipids and excess carbs and calories that you get in your diet. And as you do that, so let's say you're looking to lose weight, you'll start to use those fat stores as energy because you're consuming around the amount of calories that you need or less calories than what you need. So your body will pull from those lipid stores. And when that happens, those adipose tissue cells will become smaller and smaller and smaller. And this is how you ultimately end up losing weight. And this is a long-term process. When you first start a new exercise regimen or a new healthy diet, you may see a drastic decrease in the amount of weight that you have on your body. And this is generally due to what people call water weight. And that's because you're using those carbohydrate stores in your body, and then you're also sweating a lot more and things like that. So you see the scale tells you that you're lighter, much lighter, because you're actually losing water weight. But if you continue to have healthy exercise regimen and a healthy diet over time, your body will actually start to utilize those fats in the fat cells, and you'll actually start to have smaller and smaller adipose tissue and really start to have a positive effect on your life and on your weight. The last two nutrients that we require are vitamins and minerals. Vitamins are organic compounds that are required in very small amounts. And so they're organic because their molecular structure contains carbon. There are two types of vitamins, those that are fat soluble and those that are water soluble. And water soluble vitamins are not really too much of a threat. They are removed, excess are removed from your body via the urine. So oftentimes if you take a multivitamin, you may see that your urine may be a very bright yellow color, and this is because you're excreting high amounts of particular vitamins that are from your multivitamin that are the reason why your urine looks that color. But then we have the fat soluble vitamins, and you have to be careful of these. Fat soluble vitamins are the compounds that are stored in fat. And if you get too many of these fat soluble vitamins, it can become toxic. So because they're stored in fats, the only way you break them down is if your body pulls from those fat stores. So if you're consuming too many fat soluble vitamins, you can get to a toxic level of those vitamins and they can cause serious issues. So you want to make sure that you're not consuming too much, and too much of either is not great, but at least with the water soluble vitamins, you can remove the excess from your body relatively harmlessly without causing you major problems. And some examples of some vitamins are B vitamins like B12, B6, and then we have folic acid and biotin. Then we also have minerals, and minerals are inorganic chemicals and compounds that are required in small amounts. And they're inorganic because they do not contain carbon in their molecular structure. Some examples are iron, magnesium, chlorine, sodium, calcium, and sulfur. So the difference between vitamins and minerals compared to the carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins is that they do not yield us any energy. Instead, they're used as enzyme cofactors, or they're used to catalyze reactions within the body. So a cofactor, if you just need a refresher, is an element that binds to a protein, usually an enzyme, that allows it to now be active or to function better. And so this image here is just giving you a general understanding of what a cofactor does. So in this picture, they have their cofactor, which is this purple glob, is binding to this inactive protein. And that protein cannot do its job until the cofactor binds to it. And now that the cofactor has bound, the enzyme is complete and it can do its job. It's the same thing that happens in our bodies. Obviously, they're not colorful blobs, but we have iron molecules, calcium molecules, and various different vitamins that bind and interact to enzymes in our body that allow them to either function when they weren't going to function, or allow them to function better so that they can allow for reactions to go a lot faster than if those cofactors weren't there. And we only need vitamins and minerals in small amounts because oftentimes they are recycled in the body. We don't break them down for energy. So if once we use them, and let's say the enzyme that we're using this iron for as a cofactor is old and gets broken down, we can recycle that iron or magnesium or whatever it is and use it in another enzyme to help facilitate the process, and then just basically keep recycling it over and over and over again until it's removed from the body. And generally, as long as you have a good, healthy, varied diet, you get all the vitamins and minerals you need from your diet. There's no general need, especially if you're living in really industrialized countries like the US and Northern Europe and things like that. You don't really necessarily need excess vitamins and mineral supplements, but there are cases where this is necessary. So some examples are like if you have anemia. If you have anemia, like I do, you have to take an iron supplement. Otherwise, your body does not produce enough red blood cells to ferry the oxygen around your body that's necessary. So something like that is required. If you're vegan, you'll often have to take a B12 supplement because B12 is one of those vitamins you just can't get from plants. And but you also do need it in your body. So things like that are essential. Also, calcium for people who are lactose intolerant. We need calcium for our bones, but if you're lactose intolerant, it can be a little bit more challenging to get the calcium that you need. You can from like beans and other legumes, but let's say you hate beans and legumes and you also can't drink milk, you might need to take a calcium supplement to get the calcium you need. So as long as you have a varied diet and you don't have any other health concerns, you should be able to get all the vitamins and minerals that you need just from eating your normal food every day. So throughout this presentation, I've mentioned that having a healthy lifestyle is very important. And so now I just want to take some time to elaborate on what I mean by a healthy lifestyle and what that all entails. And so this has a lot of different parts to it. one of which is maintaining a healthy weight. So you want to maintain your weight between an appropriate range for your height and age. And you can help do this by consuming just the right amount of calories. You don't want to consume too few calories, and you don't want to consume too many calories beyond what you require just to function. Because either way, you can end up with serious health problems. And so a way to figure out what a healthy weight range for you is to use a BMI chart. And so your book included this chart here, which is a BMI chart, and BMI stands for body mass index. And it takes in consideration not just your weight, but also your height. So someone who is taller than me, I'm 5'3", should not weigh the same as me. Someone who's 6'4", if they weigh the same as much as I do, then they'd be wildly underweight. And someone who is 3 foot shouldn't weigh as much as me because they would be overweight, right? So height actually is a really important component when you're looking at a healthy weight range, because if someone's taller or shorter, you expect the differences in the healthy weight range. So how this chart works is you find your height on this y-axis here. So I'm 5'3", close to the limit range that they have for this particular chart. And if you look over, a healthy weight range for me is between 107 and 135 pounds. If I weighed less than 107 pounds, I would be underweight, which is a very negative thing too. You don't want to be way underweight. And then if I weighed more than 135 pounds, I'd be overweight. And if I weighed more than 163 pounds, I would be obese. And then it can keep going into morbidly obese if I was above 197 pounds. So this is how you can use this chart to figure out what is a good healthy weight for you and where your current weight stands as far as the BMI goes. The BMI chart is not perfect. It does not account for certain lifestyles, like those who are bodybuilders and for people like that. They tend to register as overweight or obese when they're just because they have a high amount of muscle mass. But it is a good, helpful tool to keep a good eye on what your weight range should be. And keeping a healthy weight can be challenging. It's because we're constantly battling genetic factors. Our bodies are just wired to want to eat as much food as we can when we see it, and to store as much excess calories as fat as we can. And then some people's bodies are just really, really good at storing excess energy as fat, more than others. And so when you're battling these genetic components, it can be really difficult to maintain a healthy body weight, but it is very important that you do so. And the best ways of doing this is through getting exercise and maintaining a healthy diet with lots of fruits and vegetables and complex grains, meats, and cheeses, avoiding high fats, avoiding processed foods. But there are some other ways that people can help to manage their body weight as well. Some people can use surgeries. These are usually applicable for people that are in the obese or morbidly obese category. And one that's been proven to be pretty helpful for many people who are morbidly obese is through bariatric surgery. And so this can help people to lose a lot of weight initially, which can help get them mobile so they can start moving around, walking, getting more exercise so they can continue to lose more weight and get in that healthy range. Many people also often turn to drugs and dietary supplements, both legal and illegal, to lose weight or maintain a healthy body weight. This is highly unrecommended. I think you should never turn to a quick fix like various different types of drugs in order to maintain a healthy weight, because one, this is not a long-term fix for your problem, and as well, they oftentimes come with negative side effects that you may not see immediately, but may come up later on in your life. So this is not a recommended way of going about managing your weight. And then some people use fad diets, which is also a highly unrecommended way of going about maintaining your weight. Fad diets are not a long-term solution. They are not maintainable. Water diets, popcorn diets, soup-only diets, you can't maintain that throughout your life. Now, if you change your diet to be from processed high-fat foods into more complex and healthy raw foods, that's different. But it's also a more gradual change. It's not something that you wake up and you're like, I'm just gonna eat healthy today. Like it's hard. It's really hard to do, but it's something that you must do. So don't turn to drugs or fad diets or even surgeries to help maintain a healthy body weight. It's best to get more exercise and also to switch your diet to a more healthy, complex diet in order to maintain a healthy body weight. Another part of this is maintaining a healthy caloric intake as you get older. So older people tend to have a lower metabolism than those who are younger. So a person who's 50 years old does not have the same caloric requirement as someone who's 32 years old. As you get older, your metabolism slows down, which means that you should decrease your caloric intake over time because those excess calories will be stored as fat. So that's another important component to remember as you're growing older and going through time. So physical activity is important to living a healthy lifestyle. I mentioned this already. It doesn't have to be going to the gym and getting ripped. Like just going outside and taking a 30-minute walk every day can make a massive difference in your physical appearance, in your body functioning, and it also can make a big difference in how your brain functions. So getting outside, walking around, getting some physical activity can help you physically and emotionally and psychologically. Also, having a nutritious and varied diet is a part of having a healthy lifestyle. You want to make sure that in your diet you're getting all 6 essential nutrients. The grains, fruits, veggies, meats, dairy, fats should all be incorporated into your diet every day to make sure you're getting all the essential vitamins, minerals, nutrients that you need. And then you want to make sure that your diet is low in sodium, sugar, saturated fats, cholesterol, and just fats in general. And this is because you need all of these things, but you don't want to consume too much. Too much of a good thing is a bad thing, right? So too much sodium, sugar, or saturated fats can cause serious health issues for you. Also, you want to make sure you're incorporating fiber and complex carbohydrates into your diet. We talked about the importance of fiber when it's keeping everything in your digestive tract moving and circulating properly. Also, complex carbs are good for helping you regulate your blood sugar levels, which we'll talk about a lot in the next slide. So you want to make sure you're incorporating those into your diet as well. And then also you want to make sure that you're only consuming alcohol in moderation. So like I just mentioned, too much of a good thing is a bad thing, right? And in this case, actually alcohol is a toxin for us. It's poison, which is why it makes you feel the way you do. So you want to make sure that you're just consuming alcohol in moderation. Too much of it will cause serious problems, specifically for your liver. And then avoid smoking or being exposed to smoke. So if you're a smoker, I don't have to tell you already, it's bad for you. No matter what you're doing, if you're inhaling hot liquids into your lungs, it's not good for your lungs. It can mess up the ciliated cells in your lungs and cause problems for you now or later or both. And then also being exposed to smokers. So if you're in a household where someone is smoking and you're inhaling those chemicals, that can also be problematic for you. Or if you live or work near areas that have a lot of pollution in the air, that can go into your lungs and cause problems. And then I know it's really challenging because we are in 2020 and this year has been a dumpster fire, but minimize as much stress as you can. And I know that's really hard around this time of year because it's the holidays, right? A lot of people are running around like chickens with their heads cut off trying to make holiday plans in the middle of this crazy pandemic and with everything else that's been going on. But you want to make sure you minimize the amount of stress in your life because this will cause you to have a better lifestyle. One part of this is getting some physical activity. When you go outside and just take a walk, look at nature, walk through the woods or something, that can help relieve some of that stress that you feel. If you don't want to go outside, just go in a room and do some stretching or do some yoga or something. Get up and moving, and that will help to improve your mental health and reduce the amount of stress that you're carrying on you at any given time. There are several diseases and illnesses that are associated with nutrition and lifestyle choices related to nutrition and physical activity. And some of these will be completely within our control, while others are genetically controlled and there's just nothing you can do So we'll talk about some of those. One of the major diseases that's present in the United States and in all the pretty much industrialized countries, is becoming more and more prevalent, is diabetes. And diabetes is the inability to adequately regulate one's blood sugar levels. There are two forms of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. In type 1, your body is not producing enough insulin. This is often seen in children. It's a genetic disposition that you really can't control. And then we have type 2 diabetes, which is when there's enough insulin being produced by your body, but your cells are no longer sensitive to that insulin. And so their cells don't respond the way they're supposed to uptake the glucose from the bloodstream. And so this is more present in older adults, generally due to nutrition and lifestyle choices. In both cases, you want to avoid high glycemic index foods because they cause spikes in your blood sugar level. And so these are foods that have a lot of simple sugars like honey, orange juice, white potatoes, and things like that. Instead, you want to consume more low glycemic carbohydrate foods that are result in a slower release of sugars into the body, which allows your body a chance to react and respond appropriately. So if you have a lower rate of release of carbohydrates into the bloodstream, your pancreas releases insulin at a slower rate, and then that allows your cells to more appropriately respond to the intake of sugars in your body and the uptake of insulin. So you want to make sure that you're eating more whole grains and beans, as well as incorporating a lot more vegetables and things like that into your diet to make sure that you're keeping your blood sugar from spiking and then spike and decrease, which is not good for your body. Diabetes is commonly not really taken as seriously as it should be, honestly. I think it's because in America it's so common, people don't really think about it as a major serious illness, but it truly is. If you do not manage your diabetes appropriately, there's a lot of adverse consequences that can come from that. People have vision loss or blurry vision if your blood sugar levels get too high. This can cause also damage to your circulatory system and to your kidneys. And we just talked about the circulatory system and how important they are, as well as your kidneys. We talked about the kidneys and your renal system and how you need to make sure that you're appropriately removing waste from your body. If you can't do either of these things, you're in trouble. You can also cause nerve damage. And when you have an increased amount of glucose just hanging around in your bloodstream, this can increase your chances of getting infections, which can result in amputations. And if you allow your diabetes to go completely just rampant, you're not paying any attention to it for long enough, it will kill you. So I know many people, I personally know several people who don't really take this illness that serious, and they have it. And I actually had a friend whose aunt died from diabetes because she did not just do what she was supposed to do. So I always urge people who have diabetes to make sure that they're doing the proper things that they need to do to make sure that this illness does not cause them to ultimately have a short premature end to their lives. Some other illnesses that are associated with nutrition are cardiovascular disease. So we talked about strokes and heart attacks and high blood pressure in our cardiovascular lecture. This can all be attributed to having too much lipids and cholesterol in your diet. So you want to make sure you're keeping those levels of lipids to a nice, comfortable, manageable level so that you can avoid having these types of issues. You can also have loss of energy and lethargy if you're missing valuable vitamins and nutrients in your diet. I talked about anemia. That is one thing that can definitely just zap all of your energy if you don't have enough iron in your diet to make enough red blood cells to circulate oxygen. Also, if you're consuming too few calories, you're not getting enough energy in your body to function, so you'll feel very heavy and drained and tired all the time. And then it can also lead to deficiencies if you don't have a varied diet. So we talked about vitamin D, iron, and B12 are all major deficiencies that we see in the US particularly. You want to make sure that you're getting a varied diet so you get all the nutrients that you need. Also, joint pain. So I mentioned joint pain because If you're consuming too many calories and you find yourself being overweight or obese, over time, all that excess weight on your joints, of your arms, your legs, all your joints, will cause them to be to start to rub together, because the cushions that are between the joints that keep your joints from rubbing bone to bone will start to wear down, and this can cause serious pain. And also, you want to make sure you're getting enough water as well, because if you're dehydrated, you increase the chances of getting that rubbing, which will cause pain in the joints. And then also decrease mobility. So if you're vastly overweight or obese, morbidly obese, you eventually will lose your ability to be mobile or to have those freedoms that you would enjoy any other time, to be able to bathe yourself, to walk around outside, to have fun with others, to enjoy time with your kids. It makes things very, very challenging, and just everyday things very challenging for your life. So you just want to make sure that you're being healthy. I know there's a lot of stigma out there right now about body weight, but to be honest, a lot of people are coming from a lot of physicians and scientists are coming from a good place. We want everyone to be happy and healthy and live out as long lives as possible. And having a poor diet and being overweight or obese can really shorten your life or make things very, very difficult for you throughout life. So always just keep an open mind with that. Not everybody out there is out to shame. This concludes our lecture on nutrition and digestion. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. When it comes to anatomy and physiology, this is my favorite topic. I have a true passion for nutrition and illnesses associated with nutrition, so I found this to be very interesting, and I hope that you did too. You can go ahead and read chapter 23, sections 1 through 14, and then 16 through 18, and do the chapter 23 learning curve assignment. And then I've included some videos here to help reinforce some of the topics that we've covered in this lecture. And so, with that said, I'll see you in the next lecture.